Hey guys, it's me, Seren, back with another video. So today is the other Wednesday, which makes it Hidden Figures Day. A lot of you guys have asked me, how do I come up with hidden figures and where do I find them? And really it's like a variety of places, but if I see it online, if I see a woman that looks really interesting online, or if I see it on social media, if I'm reading something and I come across a name, there have been times that I've been in museums and I've seen things about women, or I've seen murals out and about, and I just save everything. I screenshot it, I take pictures of it. But also the most regular way that I find hidden figures is from suggestions. You guys leave suggestions on Instagram, you leave me suggestions in the comments, and I always save the suggestions, and if I feel like it's a really, really interesting story, I almost always get back around to it. Case in point, today's hidden figure, Charlotte Forten Grimké, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. This woman was suggested way back in May of 2018. So if you have made a suggestion, or if you want to make a suggestion, some people have said do I take suggestions, stuff like that. I'm totally open to taking suggestions. So please feel free to make suggestions. Charlotte Louise Bridges Forten Grimké was born August 17th, 1837 and died July 23rd, 1914. She was a Black American anti-slavery activist, poet, and educator, and she grew up in a prominent abolitionist family in Philadelphia. She taught school for years, including during the Civil War, to freedmen in South Carolina. Later in life, she married Francis James Grimké, a Presbyterian minister who led a major church in Washington, D.C. for decades. He was a nephew of the abolitionist Grimké sisters and active in civil rights. Her diaries, written before the end of the Civil War, have been published in numerous editions of the 20th century and are significant as a rare record of the life of a free Black woman in the North in the antebellum years. Charlotte Forten, known as Lottie, which a lot of girls named Charlotte are known as Lottie, was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to Mary Virginia Wood and Robert Bridges Forten, members of the prominent Black Forten Purvis clan of Philadelphia. Something I found really interesting while I was learning about Charlotte Forten Grimké was that she came from this line of free Black Americans. She knew how to write. She was an abolitionist. She was a teacher. She spoke out, and that's something that we don't hear about enough as well. The fact that there were prominent Black families that were doing things, right? Prominent free Black families that were doing things. Robert Forten and his brother-in-law, Robert Purvis, were abolitionists and members of the Philadelphia Vigilance Committee, an anti-slavery network that rendered assistance to escaped slaves. Forten's mother, paternal aunts, and grandmother were all founding members of the Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society. Her grandfather, wealthy sailmaker James Forten Sr., was an early equal rights activist in Philadelphia. These are people that got rich doing trades. Her grandfather was a wealthy Black sailmaker. Charlotte's family were some of several freed Blacks featured in a book titled Sketches of Black Upper-Class Life in antebellum Philadelphia. When her mother, Mary, died of tuberculosis in 1840, Charlotte went to her grandmother, Edie Wood, for care. Upon Edie's death in 1846, Charlotte was raised by various members of the Forten Purvis family. In 1854, Charlotte began attending the Higginson Grammar School, a private academy for young women. She was the only non-white student in a class of 200. Known for emphasis on critical thinking, the school had classes in history, geography, drawing, and cartography. After Higginson, Forten studied literature and teaching at the Salem Normal School, which trained teachers. Her first teaching position was at Epps Grammar School in Salem, becoming the first Black American hired to teach white students in a Salem public school. While in Salem, Forten became a member of the Salem Female Anti-Slavery Society, where she was involved in coalition building and fundraising. She proved to be influential as an activist and leader on civil rights. She occasionally spoke to public groups on abolitionist issues, and in addition to that, she arranged for lectures by prominent speakers and writers, including Ralph Waldo Emerson and Senator Charles Sumner. Forten was acquainted with many other anti-slavery proponents, including William Lloyd Garrison, editor of The Liberator, and the orators and activists Wendell Phillips, Maria Weston Chapman, and William Wells Brown. She was well received as a teacher but returned to Philadelphia after 2 years due to tuberculosis. At this point, Charlotte Forten began writing poetry, much of which was activist in theme. Her poetry was published in The Liberator, an Anglo-African magazine. During the American Civil War, Forten was the first Black teacher to join the mission to the South Carolina Sea Islands, known as the Port Royal Experiment. A fervent abolitionist, Forten intently followed news of the Civil War. In 1861, when Union forces gained control of the Sea Islands off the coast of South Carolina, the slave owners there abandoned their plantations and 10,000 slaves. Faced with that situation, the federal government launched an experimental program to educate the former slaves and sought volunteers to serve as teachers. In 1862, Forten traveled to St. Helena Island, where she worked as a teacher for 2 years on the project. She wrote of her experiences there, and in 1864, her 2-part essay, Life on the Sea Islands, was published in the May and June issues of Atlantic Monthly. There's no reason for this woman to not have a movie. The Union allowed Northerners to set up schools to begin teaching freedmen who remained on the islands, which had been devoted to large plantations for cotton and rice. She was the first Black American to teach at the Penn School, now known as the Penn Center, on St. Helena's Island, South Carolina. The school was initially founded to teach enslaved Black American children and eventually Black American children freed during the U.S. Civil War. The Union forces divided the island, giving freedmen families plots to work independently. Forten worked with many freedmen and their children on St. Helena Island. During this time, she resided at Seaside Plantation. While there, she was thrilled to meet the renowned Harriet Tubman. Forten struck up a deep friendship with Robert Gould Shaw, the commander of the all-Black 54th Massachusetts Regiment during the Sea Islands Campaign. She was present when the 54th stormed Fort Wagner on the night of July 18, 1863. Shaw was killed in the battle, and Forten volunteered as a nurse to the surviving members of the 54th. Following the war in the late 1860s, Forten worked for the U.S. Treasury Department in Washington, D.C., recruiting teachers. In 1873, she became a clerk in the department. In December 1878, Forten married Presbyterian minister Francis J. Grimké, pastor of the prominent 15th Street Presbyterian Church in Washington, D.C., a major Black American congregation. At the time of their marriage, Forten was 41 years old and Grimké was 28. Oh, she was getting it. Charlotte Forten Grimké helped her husband in his ministry, helping create important networks in the community, including providing charity and education. Many church members were leaders in the Black American community in the capital. She organized a women's missionary group and continued her racial uplift efforts. The Charlotte Forten Grimké House in Washington, D.C. is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And for those of you that saw my Hidden Figures on Alma Thomas, who was an artist that was based out of Washington, D.C., the Alma Thomas house, which is also a historic place where that artist lived, is actually in the same neighborhood as Charlotte Grimké in DuPont Circle, which used to be a historically Black American neighborhood. Ask me if it still is. No, it's not. Charlotte Forten Grimké's last literary effort was in response to the Evangelist editorial, Relations of Blacks and Whites, Is There a Color Line in New England? The editorial asserted that Blacks were not discriminated against in New England society. Forten Grimké responded that Black Americans were indeed discriminated against in New England and that they achieved success over extraordinarily social odds and that they simply wanted fair and respectful treatment. And I really respect that she wrote that because we still see this used today. Well, if Oprah could do it, why can't you do it? If LeBron could do it, why can't you do it? You know, here's someone that did come from a prominent, sort of wealthy family of freed Black Americans that recognize me and my family are the exceptions. Like, we got very, very lucky. So I'm going to use the privilege that I have as someone that is educated, as someone that is literate, as someone that was born into this certain family to push back against this assertion that Black people in New England in the North are just motherfucking fine, that Black Americans in New England aren't having any problems. And that is still to this day an idea that's really kind of perpetuated. Oh, racism is just a down south. No, it's not. Like, stop those lies. Charlotte Forten Grimké was a regular journal writer until she returned north after teaching in South Carolina. After her return, her entries were less frequent. Her journals are a rare example of documents detailing the life of a free black female in the antebellum North. In her diary on December 14, 1862, Forten made one of the earliest recorded references to the blues as a sad or depressed state of mind. She was teaching in South Carolina at the time and wrote that she came home from a church service with the blues because she felt very lonesome and pitied myself. She soon got over her sadness and later noted that certain songs, including one called Poor Rosie, that were popular among the slaves made her feel better. Forten admitted that she could not describe the manner of singing, but she did write that the songs can't be sung without a full heart and a troubled spirit. Those conditions inspired countless blues songs and could be described as the essence of having the blues and also of blues singing. This black woman, she made that term up. She did. Charlotte Grimké died on July 23, 1914 in Washington, D.C. Throughout her married life, Forten Grimké continued to write poetry and essays. She also maintained her commitment to issues of social justice, becoming actively involved with the National Association of Colored Women and the cause of women's suffrage. The journals of Charlotte Forten Grimké were published in one volume in 1988. Those eloquent and insightful diaries offer one of the rare perspectives of a free black woman on the period of transition after the end of slavery in America. Charlotte Forten Grimké, a hidden figure. Thank you so much to the person that suggested it. This woman is pretty fucking amazing, and there of course will be tons of links in the description box for you to read more about her. Food for thought as always. Hopefully everyone's having a great week. See you guys next time. Peace.